This is David Plazas, Community Conversation Editor and Chair of the Editorial Board. And while we've all been acquainted, if we could, just for the purposes of the board, just introduce ourselves, and then we'll start with Representative Caldwell.
Representative Matt Caldwell, represents the 73rd District, Fort Myers House seat now, and running for re-election in the new District 79, Lehigh Acres, Alba, and Fort
Myers. Roy Hyman, former editorial board member.
I'm Luis Insignares. I'm a citizen board member from South Fort Myers.
Pam Grouthouse, citizen board member from Bonita Springs.
And Martha Hill, conversation link from your page.
Dick Kalfis, citizen member from Cape Coral.
Brad Gabber, citizen muckraker.
Yellow journalist extraordinary.
Yes, that's me.
Well, Representative Caldwell, I wanted to ask you something as we go into this. We've seen, many of us know your bio. We've seen you over these last 2 years working in the House. Representative Kriegel was on the air on Daybreak this morning, and he had mentioned that, in his opinion, the role of a freshman legislator was to go up and push a button, essentially, for what leadership says. And I wanted to see if you agree with that. And I know Representative Kriegel tends to be very direct in his language, but I asked that because I want to know a little bit about what you're most proud of and how you approach leadership, given the fact that you've got so little time to do what you have to do.
Well, yeah, Representative Kriegel is quite the card. If you didn't catch his farewell speech, it's the shortest on record ever in the House. It was farewell, and that was it. I would disagree with him, though, about the issue of going to push a button. There were multiple times this year where I felt strongly about a position, particularly as it concerned Southwest Florida, and that was in contrast to the way leadership wanted an issue to go. The easiest one to point to was the preemption of fertilizer regulation, and my thought that that issue ought to remain at the local level, not an issue of, for me, the litmus test or the filter I put those through is, does the issue deal with basic principles, basic rights as citizens, which is the role of our state government to protect. If it doesn't deal with that, if it really is just an issue of management at a local level, I'm more comfortable with that being dealt with local governments. It didn't come up this year, but the same thing with the aggregate mining issue, which is a pretty regular controversy between the local and state government, and who's going to regulate that. I expressed my opinion, and I don't feel as though there was any kind of punishment for that. I really think a lot of times, you get respected for speaking your mind and having an informed, educated position. And the other part of it is not surprising anybody. I mean, if you recognize that you're in a body, a collegial body, and despite your differences, you ought to give each other the respect that's due for the office, then you don't surprise them with a no vote at the last minute. You don't want them showing up to a committee or to the floor thinking it's going to go one way and it swings the other because you just jump up and change your mind. And that, I think, goes a long way to covering 99% of the issue. If you just are honest, I mean, that's really what we were admonished in the first year was, if you have an issue with a colleague's bill, go see them before it gets on the agenda, before your colleague's standing there presenting it. And I can tell you there have been a couple of times where I did think I had an issue with the bill, and we're listening to testimony, listening to the testimony of my colleagues, and if there was another committee stop, and I may have started to have questions, maybe wanted to not support it, I would say that. I'd say that, I had had opportunity, didn't think I felt differently about this than I do now. I'm going to vote to let it forward to the next committee stop because it would be a disservice to the member. But they would work to try to remedy those issues at the next stop.
What are you most proud of from these in your first term?
Well, we had a lot of fantastic accomplishments. I was honored to help us get the Andrew Whitman Act across the line. Representative Thompson, my predecessor, worked to get it out of the House for the 2 years. He carried it, and with the help of Senator Benaquisto, we were able to get that law passed and done in our first term. Certainly maintaining our unique position as, if you look at the country, there's really 5 large states: Texas, California, Illinois, New York, and Florida. Texas benefits from having oil revenue. Their budget can stay balanced because they have energy, a major energy sector, to keep it that way. The other 4 didn't, and all 4 of us faced budget crisis. We were the only state that did not respond by raising taxes. We are the only state that, in fact, has found a way to cut our budget. If you watch the news came out this weekend, California is now going to find itself in a very major problem with a $16 billion deficit in their next year's budget. Those aren't easy decisions. There's nothing fun. It's a lot more fun to be able to have surplus money and decide who you want to hand it out to than to decide which of the worthy causes is less important. But from the citizens' perspective, we've been able to keep their tax burden the same or lower than it was going into the recession and give them more flexibility to try to recover just the way the rest of us are.
You know, your involvement now with the county commission, with the single-member districts, and then talking about the money that, the budget and things. How does that play with the legislature, with your role in the legislature as well? Are there other members of the House that are getting active like this in local government, or are you kind of unique in this aspect?
There are some that get involved. It really depends on the member and what their interest is, and certainly this is an issue that I was interested in before I ever ran for legislative office. If you recollect, I started on this particular issue 6 years ago now. And really that's carried forward, that passion about that issue. I think 2 things to note about it is I try very hard. Obviously you can't separate it. People know me now as a representative. But I try to keep them separate. We have not pushed these issues, the issues of the charter or any local changes, tried to ramrod it from a legislative perspective. I mean, we could legally, as a delegation, just demand these charter changes be placed on the ballot. Probably would be a dispute and a lawsuit, I'm sure, with the county and the federal and the state government. But I don't want to do that at all because I don't think that would be true the spirit of the charter. So I'm trying to keep the 2 roles separate. I do think it probably fits with what people perceive me as having a keen interest in my role on community and military affairs, which is the local affairs committee. That's the subcommittee that all of the local bills are sent to. Their first stop. Every bill that deals with the county or city governments across the state end up there. And that was the committee who worked on the massive growth management reform. And going back to those accomplishments, it was, it really was providence for me. I showed up the first term, and it just happened to be that this is what the leadership wanted to work on. But a chance to totally reconsider growth management, something that had grown and evolved over 30 years. That was an amazing opportunity, and I threw myself full hog into that. And we, I think, came up with a good product that recognized greater need for local control and devolved that power into the governments.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that, Matt. The proposal, as I understand it, is to jump to 7 commissioners. Each district, citizens will only be able to vote for 3. But all 7 will vote on all the issues. So then 4 of those 7 won't be accountable to the voters that they are voting either for or against.
Well, first of all,
And theoretically, well, not theoretically, actually,
certainly 4 of them would not be accountable in terms of being elected by the entire community, all 620,000.
And how do you reconcile that?
Well, 2 things. First of all, start with, I don't believe there is any perfect system. And what you've seen us propose today is the product of a 6-year effort to compromise with the various groups that came and contributed in both the charter review process in 2007 and 2008 and subsequent to that, and trying to balance those concerns as best we could. The risk you run whenever you do that is pleasing no one and offending everyone. And so we will see whether that's what we've achieved at this point with this proposal. But I don't think it's a fatal flaw in the things you point out. No more than it's a fatal flaw in how our state legislature and our federal legislature is composed of single-member districts. I mean, ostensibly, I only represent the 73rd district, but at the end of the day, I have an equal vote on the $70 billion budget as the other 119 members. And so you have no more or less of a distinction there in the 5 single members you would have. And then, so in essence, what's proposed is really a unicameral county legislature where you have 2 senators and 5 representatives in the same body. That is the net result. You can, our supporters on the board, both Ryan and Frank have said they could argue easily both ways. They've said they prefer just to send it to the voters and let them decide.
They would be arguing against accountability.
Well, I don't think so. I think the question is, does the opportunity for absolute accountability actually achieve the result you desire? I would say